I don't think you're gonna love my new job.
You can't expect your uncle to start you out at the top.
Janie, I never said anything about Uncle Louie giving me a job.
I don't understand. You walked away from the department and a good paycheck. Why else?
You know what I've always talked about.
Remind me.
Well, think about it. You should know me better than anybody. We are engaged.
Well, I know what you've always talked about doing, but it's so impractical. A little boy's dream.
Thanks for the show of confidence.
It's just not realistic. These days, particularly.
Well, it's what I'm doing.
A private detective. You're going to be a private detective.
Not going to be. I am one.
Did you even think about asking your Uncle Louis for a job?
Not really.
I mean, why? Why did you quit the department anyway? Over that awful shooting? These things happen.
I hadn't told her the whole story yet, what really transpired up at Nitty's handbook, but now I did. By the end of it, she was angry.
They just came into Barney's and grabbed you. Didn't even tell you what they were up to. Louses, bums. And I suppose they expect you to testify for them at the Nitty trial.
I will testify for them.
Then why quit then? If you'd stayed with the department and testified, you could get something out of it. Why help them cover it up and get nothing?
I am getting something out of it. A private investigator's license and a gun permit. So I can do business. Mayor Cermak himself guaranteed it.
Oh, Mayor Cermak. Well, that's different.
I told her about the Cermak meeting, and it impressed her. And I told her about the Nitty hospital visit, and that scared her. But when I told her about General Dawes, she perked back up.
Why don't you take advantage of the generous offer? $3,000 is like $1 million.
$3,000 for supervising pickpocket security at the fair would be easy money. It'd make my first year in business a rousing success, even if not a single other client walked in the door.
And it would be just the beginning. You get something much better out of Dawes and your uncle. You could get a real job with a bank or a business or something.
Janie, I do have a real job. I am in business. I'm president of the A1 Detective Agency. I'll be first in the yellow pages.
Where do I fit in? What about the house we talked about?
Look, I still have the nest egg money in the bank. I managed to start up the A1 without dipping into that, thanks to Barney's largesse.
How does Barney factor into this?
I told her about my arrangement with him for the office space, playing night watchman, about the furnishings he'd provided, the works.
He's a good friend.
Give me a year to get my feet under me and we could start looking for that house.
It's not like there aren't foreclosures available.
Happy now?
Happy. Nathan, you know I only want what's best for you.
Observations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
I've heard it said before, like, it was a very smart man named Robert Meyer Burnett who said the currency of our current age is authenticity. And it's so true.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and of course, your existential Mr. Rogers. And here's a great poster of me as the collector that was given to me for my 1000th episode of Robservations. It's once again me, Robert Meyer Burnett. And you know what? First of all, that was Katie Sackhoff, and that was Michael Rosenbaum as Nathan Heller from True Noir Episode 3. True Noir, the first act, Episodes 1, 2, and 3 are going to be available on, well, Friday, tomorrow. And go subscribe. You know, it's been the thing I've been working on for the last better part of a year. Very proud of it. Never made an audio drama before. It's star-studded. You got a little taste of it there. You hear how good the acting is, and the thing is full of genre favorites. And, of course, you know, Michael Rosenbaum was Lex Luthor in Smallville. Now, look, do you think that I could let this day go by and not comment on the Superman trailer? Even I have been watching everyone else's Superman trailer video reactions, and whether they're on Instagram for all the people that were there for the unveiling on, was it Monday or Tuesday, the genre press, or, you know, everybody. And of course, I was dying to see it. And yes, I did wake up at 6 o'clock this morning, actually 5:53, and I was there for the countdown. There for the countdown. Put your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars. And I was, deliriously excited for it. And you know what? That alone, to be deliriously excited to see a trailer. Look, man, I went to the Siege just to see the trailer for The Phantom Menace in Westwood. Daniel Alter was there. I asked him to save me a place in line. And, to see fandom, now, before we get into, anything else, to see fandom excited. Hey, there was the people waiting to hate it, the Snyder Bros with their knives ready to carve the trailer up. And then there was people just indifferent. And then there was people like myself that were very curious. And then there was a lot of people that were just excited to see a trailer for a new big budget auteurist. Remember, James Gunn wrote and directed this, which to have an auteurist Superman is pretty amazing, which we've never really gotten before. So that alone, everybody was excited, and that was worth celebrating. Now, before we get into what I thought, let me just, when I was getting off the stream the other night, Flo from Austria fired in a tip, which is different than a super chat. You can use the tip feature. It is in the description of tonight's show. Also, the articles I'm going to read about toxic fandom, but not in the way you think. Flo from Austria said this: "Dear Rob, thank you for years of amazing content. You rock. I was curious, did Campia ever mention Critical Drinker or Nerdrotic, since they're critical of him and you know them? And lastly, will there ever be a Rob versus Mike Stoklasa from Red Letter Media Star Trek trivia battle?" Well, first of all, my love for Red Letter Media is absolutely boundless. I discovered Mike and his brilliant dissertations on both Star Trek and Star Wars when I first ran across his Generations review, I want to say over a decade ago. And Mr. Plinkett became, he's right up there with Pauline Kael in terms of knowing how to disassemble a movie that he does not like. Despite the fact that he's got bodies and dismembered pieces of human flesh in his basement along with pizza rolls. I love Mike, and I love Red Letter Media. I've never met them. I've never spoken to them. We've never streamed together, but I really love those guys, and I love what they do. Mike would probably beat me in a trivia battle because I used to pore over all kinds of Star Trek books and everything, but I just don't do that like I did before. I don't, although all my Star Trek reference books are right over there, and I could bone up. But I don't, I wouldn't want to pit myself against Mike. I would just love to share our love of our favorite franchise together. So that would be terrific. Also, I want to give a big shout out to costume designer, Academy Award nominated costume designer Marilyn Vance, who was the costume designer on movies like Die Hard, The Untouchables, Some Kind of Wonderful. She's Some Kind of Wonderful. She worked for John Hughes. She did Streets of Fire. I do her podcast, the Designing Hollywood podcast, and she had a lovely dinner for all the people that work for Designing Hollywood. Martika Ibarra, our producer, the lovely Martika Ibarra. And, of course, Philip Boutet. Philip Boutet is a great designer in his own right, and Philip worked on Man of Steel and Zack Snyder's Justice League. And before I even go further, let me just say that Philip Boutet and I shared our love of Zack Snyder's, what I would like to call, Man of Steel trilogy, which is, of course, Man of Steel, BVS, Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, The Ultimate Cut, and, of course, Zack Snyder's Justice League. And he had worked on, as I said, he worked on Zack Snyder's Justice League, and we talked about our love of that trilogy. And I've always, been a proponent, like on the John Campia show, about Man of Steel. And I've always, I loved Zack Snyder's vision. And as I said, it's fucking metal. We started Midnight Metal because of Zack Snyder's Justice League. So I am not a hater, just so everybody knows. However, I do feel that while I enjoy watching those three movies, the Wagnerian operatic aspects of what we're seeing, I do find them to be joyless and fairly empty. They're movies about tableaus, but they're not movies about the heart. Now, you might think that's a terrible criticism. I do not, because there's something to be said for Zack Snyder's tableaus. They're incredible. the visions he presented for some of my favorite characters, and what he did with the character of Cyborg, that Joss Whedon, was criminal what he did taking Cyborg out of that movie. And to me, look, I don't think of Cyborg. Vic Stone, he belongs to the Teen Titans. He will always belong to the Teen Titans. He doesn't belong to the Justice League. I understand. Should have been Jon Stewart, but hey, it means I got I got a Cyborg hot toy out of it. So that was all good. But we were really sharing the love, and that vision that Zack Snyder brought to those characters, and as a lifelong DC fan, I really appreciated it. I really liked it. However, I liked it from a distance. I did not love those movies the way I liked, say, Field of Dreams and Back to the Future, which I talked about the other night, and you'll understand why I brought those up, and you'll figure that one out shortly. But to me, those movies, they didn't penetrate my heart. I did not feel my heart soar the way it soared when I was 11 years old and watched Richard Donner's Superman the movie at the John Dance Cinema in Bellevue, Washington, when I was 11. I didn't feel that, but that doesn't mean I couldn't enjoy those movies on the spectacle that they were presented with, which I think is okay. You know, I look at different movies in different ways, and I like movies for different reasons. But I wanted to start with an article before I get into my feelings about the Superman trailer that I found about, yes, toxic fandom, but not the way you might think. And this is from a website, and this was published in 2018, and I wanted to share it. And it is this: Us Versus Them, Toxic Fandom and the Cult of Identity. Now, this is from Aaron Cooper, and it is actually from a website called, well, that's a good question. I'm looking at the wrong thing, so I can't tell you. The Bearded Gentleman's Music. Bearded Gentleman's Music. Let's take a gander, shall we? I thought this was terrific. It's not what you might think. First of all, Aaron Cooper wrote this on July 6th, 2018. It was published. In 1893, Arthur Conan Doyle had enough of writing countless Sherlock Holmes stories. Despite being paid well by the publisher, Doyle grew tired of the format and trappings of writing about one particular character. So he did the unthinkable. He killed him. Outraged fans wrote countless letters to the publisher, and Doyle himself begging, pleading, and sometimes even threatening. But fans across the world realized they could keep Holmes alive by writing their own stories. With the character, fandom was born. Fandom is a community of people sharing the love of a common interest. While most are built upon fellowship, fandoms are capable of a dark side. Recently, I wrote an article professing my love of the Misfits, the band. In that piece, I praised the band for creating a community who often felt out of place among other music fans. They brought people together to share their love of horror movies and rock and roll, and empowering them in the process. Camaraderie is the perfect example of fandom being used in a positive manner. However, somewhere within the last 10 or 20 years, fandoms have revealed an ugly side. Sometimes far more sinister than the occasional knuckle-dragging fan. These days, it seems like fandoms are an entire subculture dedicated to mental subscription, one that caters to a much more toxic demographic. In order to understand the toxicity of fandoms, we need to take a look at how and why they are created in the first place. Marketing. Whether you care to admit it or not, marketing plays an integral part in the consumer deciding if something is right for them. In most cases, this is a commercial or internet advertisement displaying a product or service, be it a catchy song, a visual gag, or even the promise of sexual validation. These ads are the most important tools in getting the product to its rightful audience. We're all aware of how it works. If you want to feel cool, General Motors has a car for that. Want to feel sexy? Wear this perfume. But there's also a type of marketing that caters to the individual on a personal level. Enter identity marketing. Identity marketing is a little more shady in nature because it not only singles out a specific type of person, but also encourages entitlement. Where most advertisers rarely acknowledge those overlooking their product, identity marketing suggests those who don't get the fandom are inferior people. Making a fan feel more deserving of the fandom is where the toxicity comes in. When entitlement becomes the driving force, it never ends well. This is where fandoms go horribly wrong. Department stores are no longer selling action figures to children. They've come to realize fanboy collectors is where the money is. When this mentality is used by artists or celebrities, things get a bit more dangerous. Every artist wants a dedicated fan base, but when does a group of fans become a cult? Have you ever noticed how the most dedicated fans of a specific artist have a name? Taylor Swift's Swifties, Beyoncé's Bayhive, 21 Pilots' Skeleton Clique. Cultivating a name for a fan base is identity marketing in full effect. Recognizing yourself as part of a labeled fandom means you have mentally subscribed. You are now part of an exclusive community of like-minded individuals, and anyone not in that community isn't a real fan. No thanks to social media, toxic fandom has not only been normalized, but celebrated, maybe even encouraged. Mentally subscribing to a fandom is a means to a showboat legitimacy. The most common scenario is a metal fan being upset when they see Kim Kardashian wearing a Slayer t-shirt. I bet she can't even name 3 Slayer songs. While it's unlikely Kim could tell Rain in Blood from Repentless, the only reason why anyone would assume she is a fan or isn't a fan is due to the entitlement of fandom. She doesn't look like us, so she can't be one of us. I'm sure you can already see where this is going and how it's problematic. In the past, fandoms were mostly exclusive to a small set of people. It's not only safer to express your love of something unpopular in the mainstream while in small numbers, but it's simply more appealing. After all, if everyone loved Neon Genesis Evangelion, it wouldn't feel as cool, right? This also lends to the idea of social status. The battle of us versus them will never go out of style, seeing as being considered a nerd is far more prestigious than being considered popular. Unfortunately, social status feeds narcissism. Most fandoms have become vitriolic internet trolls, seeking out threats to their circles where there are none. Hardcore Star Wars fans were so upset with Kelly Marie Tran's character in The Last Jedi, she was forced to leave social media due to constant bullying. An angry mob of Rick and Morty fans once terrorized a McDonald's because they didn't have enough Szechuan sauce. Is that true? These incidents might sound petty, but property damage and mental instability say otherwise. As stated in my Where Are the Negative Album Reviews article, even I find myself passing on certain reviews because I don't want to deal with fandom backlash. While it might be easy to ignore fandom trolls, sometimes taking the high road is the only option. That's not to say all fandoms are toxic. If every dedicated fan was a garbage person, the world would be in complete chaos. If you identify as being a part of fandom, and I do for most of my life, it might be a good idea to take a look at yourself and see what kind of a fan you are. Well, if you ask me about Star Trek Discovery, I think everyone watching this show knows exactly what kind of a fan I am, even though Star Trek is my favorite IP. And boy, when I watch Section 31, I'm probably going to do so with toxic levels of alcohol in my system. What that says about me, I'll leave that for you to decide. Do you get angry when someone begins to enjoy something you've enjoyed for years? Does a subpar franchise installment change the love you have for previous releases? Are you projecting an image of bigotry or entitlement? If you answered yes to any of these questions, you might be perpetuating the toxicity without even knowing it. If fandoms are communities, it's inevitable there will be a few insufferable douchebags. Taking the time to see where you stand may be key to recognizing and calling out those who are ruining the fandom for everyone else. After all, if you're not part of the problem, maybe you can be part of the solution, or at least become a better human being in the process. So that's what I wanted to read first. And I thought it was good, a little generic. It's not like it was somebody telling us something we don't know. But I will say this. I, personally, have been a fan for a very long time. I'm into my, if you I guess, 6th decade of fandom, maybe. Well, 5th decade, not my 6th yet, 5th decade of fandom. And I really have said on the show, I consider my fandom, when I became a true fan, I was 5. I was 5 years old, and it was a confluence of events in my 5th year on this planet that turned me into a lifelong fan. It was obviously Star Trek going into strip syndication. It was The Twilight Zone. It was The Outer Limits. It was Channel 11 Sci-Fi Theater. And it was the first time I ever saw the original Planet of the Apes because my parents let me stay awake. And I've told this story many times on the show. Maybe I'll tell it again. But I would watch anything that had any whiff of science fiction, fantasy, or horror. It did not matter what it was. It didn't matter if it was black and white. It didn't matter if it was made for television. It didn't matter if it was a movie. If it had some kind of sci-fi monster, glaive-wielding crystal spider, I didn't care. I would watch it. It didn't matter if it was good or bad. Anything I would watch because I loved it all. I hadn't discerned anything yet, whether I didn't know the difference. I could tell that there were some Twilight Zone episodes I liked more than others. I knew that there were Star Trek episodes I liked more than others. I knew there were Outer Limits episodes I liked more than others, and I certainly knew there were Godzilla movies I liked more than others. But you know what? I would never say I disliked any of it. Loved it all, because I was 5. And everything was a gift. And it was amazing, and I was open-minded, and I was there for it, man. I was there for it. When I saw Planet of the Apes, blew my fucking mind. I thought, and I've told the story before, but why don't I tell it again? So, Planet of the Apes came on at 9 o'clock on, I think it was on a Friday night, and that was my bedtime when I was 5. That was pretty good. A lot of kids had to go to bed at 8, but if I went to bed at 8, I was going to wake up at like 6 or 7 in the morning, so 9 o'clock was pretty good, especially on a Friday night, Saturday morning. So, watching TV, whatever, turned the channels, and I found Charlton Heston in what clearly was, I didn't know it was Charlton Heston. He was in an astronaut suit, and he was clearly giving a ship's log, and he was clearly at the cockpit, in a cockpit of a futuristic ship. You know, I leave the 20th century behind with no regrets. Does man still make war against his brother? I'm like, hey, it's a ship's log. And I knew what that was. And then I was watching it, and of course I didn't have a lot of experience with movies, and when he finished, got into his suspended animation chamber, the credits rolled. And I thought, because back in the day they would show all the credits up front, because not as many people worked on movies. So, and I'm watching the I figured it, I'm still seeing some kind of fantasy stuff because there was lights so I'm watching the credits, but I'm terribly disappointed because it's over. You know, I missed something. I missed what kind of an astronaut was Charlton Heston? I didn't fucking know. And then, of course, the Icarus, their ship, crashes into what was Lake Powell. Crashes into Lake Powell, and I realized the movie was still going. I'm like, oh my God, it was the beginning of the movie. So I made a beeline up 2 flights of stairs, and it was I almost flew, Superman style. I was going so fast. I went up the 2nd flight of stairs into my parents' bedroom, which was at the top landing to the left, and I'm begging my mother. I was manic. She saw this before. And I was like, there's a ship. It crashed in the water. And I'm like, I have to watch it. You have to let me stay up. And this often happened in my house. James Bond movies on Sunday nights, especially like Thunderball, that were going to be in 3-hour time slots. Same thing happened. But my mom was like, and she goes, what is the name of the movie? And I'm like, well, it said Planet of the Apes. And my mom kind of gave me a wry little smile, and she said, okay, you can watch it. So I go back down, and I sit in my favorite love seat, Barca-lounger, call it what you want. And it was my chair. No one ever sat in that but me. Actually, nobody ever came in the TV room except me because if people talked, even at 5, I'm like, shh, shut the fuck up. I didn't say that at 5, but I was, I tried to keep people quiet. So I'm watching Planet of the Apes, and of course you all remember the 3 astronauts are trudging through the Forbidden Zone, and then they get their clothes stolen, naked dudes, there's ass on TV. I was like, what the hell? It was the 70s. And then, of course, you find, the clearing where there's the food, and you see all these human beings in skins. And of course, I'm still watching. There's no spaceships or monsters or anything. And I'm like, what's going on? I didn't know what was going on, but it was intriguing. I was like, I don't know. There was weird lightning and there was weird scarecrows. And then here's the moment that I think that I became a true imagination connoisseur. And this was it. This was what sent me over the edge. This was a single moment. Call it a singularity, post-geek singularity. This is when my geek singularity happened. This is when I became a believer. I did not see a light from the sky. I did not hear a ram's horn blow. I did not, I was not touched. But what I did see was leather armored apes on horseback. And I saw what I first registered as my first snap zoom when whoosh, into, I want to say, it wasn't General Aldo, but, ape soldier, and then Jerry Goldsmith's score. I didn't know what sex was then, but figuratively, I blew my load all over that room. I mean, when Star-Lord talked about in his starship, certain artists, well, okay, I don't want it. But you know what I mean? I was 5, so I hadn't got there yet. I mean, I didn't even know what that was. But mentally, somewhere in my, ape brain, I knew exactly what it was. And I had an imagination orgasm. I couldn't fucking believe what I had just seen. And then it kept going. Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape. And then Goldsmith score, Bana. If you've ever seen the movie, let me just say that was it. I was 5 years old and I had a fucking epiphany. I had an epiphany that turned me into an imagination connoisseur. And I am a half century away from that. And I am still the same excited fucking 5-year-old. I mean, yeah. Have I become hardened? Are my hands more calloused? Just from life, not from, I moisturize. But anyway, it was a big thing. And after that moment, I realized the power of the imagination, the power of cinema, the power to be transported places I'd never been before. And if I like things, that, and also turned me into a movie fan, because I had to know, what the fuck is this? And the next morning, my mom asked me, how was Planet of the Apes, Bob? She was like, Bob. If she was mad at me, she'd be Bob. But when she was like, it was curt when she was interested. Bob, not Bob. So I told her, I said it was the most incredible thing I'd ever seen. And my mom was just smiling and laughing. And I couldn't stop describing all the things that I saw in the movie. And things I didn't know what never trust anyone under 30 meant. I didn't know what the hear no evil, see no evil, speak no. I didn't know what half that shit meant. I didn't get the satire. All I knew is that one human being was now living with apes and another human being had his brain. You cut out his brain. I mean, just imagine what a 5-year-old kid seeing that movie for the first time, that I knew nothing about it. Nobody told me. I just discovered it. I came across it. It was like finding the Ark of the Covenant and opening it up. At least, well, I didn't keep my eyes closed. And if I opened the Ark of the Covenant, I wouldn't have kept my eyes closed. So that's a bad example because I wouldn't be here anymore. But you know what I mean? It literally changed my brain. It changed my brain. It was like when I read Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash when it first came out, it talks about how language can re-alter your brain, your understanding. I felt that way when I was editing. I learned to edit non-linearly when I was editing my first movies and stuff non-linearly in the mid-90s, changing the way my brain thought this. Seeing Planet of the Apes for the first time, dude, I'm telling you. And 5 years later, I saw Star Wars the weekend it came out. But it turned me into a lifelong... Anyway, the attitude I had then was I would watch anything and everything. And as I started to move through life, I learned that there were things that were good, things that were great, and things that weren't so good. But even the things that weren't so good, I loved them. I loved them because I could find something like, look, I've talked about this before. There's a movie called They Came from Beyond Space. It's not good. Michael Gow is in it. Alfred from Tim Burton's Batman movies. It was made in the late 60s. There was something about British sci-fi, like the Quatermass movies. I dug British sci-fi, but sometimes it really sucked. And They Came from Beyond Space wasn't great. But Michael Gow played a character called the Moon, I believe he played a character called the Moon Master. And I just thought it was a pretty silly role, but I'd like to be a Moon Master. Godzilla's Revenge, not a great movie. But it didn't matter. I don't even care if they repurpose footage from other Toho Godzilla movies. I watched it. I liked the idea of a little kid being beaten up, but then he had these fantasies about going to Monster Island. It didn't fucking matter. I would watch anything and everything. Black and white, don't care. Twilight Zone was black and white. Outer Limits was black and white. Does that mean I'm not going to watch them? No. If there was a chance, the Universal Monster movies, first time I saw Frankenstein with that hand crawling, it scared the shit out of me. I knew it was made in the 1930s. Didn't matter. Had to see it. In 1978, and again, told this story before, in 1978, after Star Wars came out, there was a lot of books published, and there was a book called Sci-Fi Now, written by Alan Frank, and it was a pictorial history of science fiction films. It had 2001 on the cover and Star Wars on the cover, and I bought this book, and it was great. It was a great overview of all the science fiction cinema and fantasy cinema. It was really quite in depth. And I was like, oh man. And when I read that book, I was like, I'm going to see every single fucking movie in this book. And there were hundreds of movies in this book. And there was no home video then. I'm like, how am I going to see these movies? Don't know. But I'm going to see them all. And as far as I know, I've seen every one of the movies in that book except one. And why do I not want... I own the last movie that I haven't seen on Blu-ray. I don't want to watch it. I don't want to watch it because if I watch it, then my experience with that Alan Frank Sci-Fi Now book from 1978 will be over. Now, there's been a lot more movies since 1978 that have come out, and I haven't seen all of them, but I've seen a lot of them. And there's been lots of science fiction, fantasy, horror, all kinds, we know. I don't have to tell you what's come out since 1978, the year Superman the movie came out. You all know. And for those interested, the movie that I have not seen from Alan Frank's Sci-Fi Now is a movie called The Bed-Sitting Room, directed by Superman 2's Richard Lester, or the 3 and 4 Musketeers, or help director Richard Lester. And I own it. I just don't want to watch it. It's kind of like Andrew Vaux's last Burke novel, Another Life. Don't want to read that either. I have it. It's right there. That's the last Burke novel. I don't know. It's kind of a weird thing. I told Andrew Vaux that. He goes, I understand. But anyway... So when I grew up as a kid, I loved it all. And the idea of me not liking something was foreign. I never would have thought that way. Never would have been that way. Why wouldn't you like something? But then as I got older, I recognized, I started to look at things that I became a little bit more sophisticated in my tastes. And I started to not love everything as much, but I didn't dislike it. I just understood. Okay. I understood I can't love Reptilicus. I understand it's like a Danish Godzilla knockoff, but I might've liked it the first time Sci-Fi Theater aired it, but the second time Sci-Fi Theater aired it, I was like, this is bad. This is bad. Like I understood Reptilicus was not my jam anymore. Tastes start to gel, coagulate. You start to like what you like, and you can recognize, you start developing a little bit of critical acumen, which I think is important. I think being discerning is good. But here's the thing. At that time, if I ran into somebody that loved Reptilicus, I'm like, bro, I got you. Like, I understood. I would never say to somebody, dude, Reptilicus is shite. That movie blows. It's fucking terrible. Even though it pretty much demonstrably is. Because I like They Came from Beyond Space. And it's not good. It had the Moon Master in it. Some people would think that's pretty fucking dumb. And if you look at his robe, he kind of looks like Melvin Belli in the 3rd season Star Trek episode And the Children Shall Lead, which, in my estimation, is probably the single worst Star Trek episode ever made. But even that episode has, well, at one point you're sad for those kids. But that doesn't matter. But the thing is, then, as I started to become 10, 11, 12, I started reading. I started reading a lot of books. Actually, I started reading books earlier, but then I started to really delve into the science fiction classics because then there wasn't enough media. You'd go to a science fiction conventions, everything was the fucking same. Media was where casual fans went. Literary Star Trek or literary science fiction fans you had to read, like when I joined the science fiction book club at 10, you had to read. I was talking about this last night with Adrian Iscari on Twitter. You had to read Childhood's End. You had to read Stranger in a Strange Land. You had to read Dune. You had to read Starship Troopers. You know, you had to read The Stars, My Destination. I don't think that came out yet. Maybe it had. I don't know. Maybe. But you had to read The Demolished Man. You had to read Ursula K. Le Guin's The Left Hand of Darkness. Because if you didn't know the foundational underpinnings of all science fiction. Like, you couldn't watch science fiction movies without having a foundational understanding of the genre, which is inherently literary. So I knew this when I was fucking 10. And I knew it because by then I was reading magazines, I was going to the library, I was getting every film book I could get my hands on. I was immersed, man. And literature was where you could become the most immersed. There was no fucking internet. I would pedal my way to the library and, Mercer Island Library. They had a lot of cool shit there. And I read every book about UFOs and every book about strange phenomena like the Bermuda Triangle or spontaneous human combustion. I read all of it because it was adjacent to my interests in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. I will admit I did read The Sword of Shannara, and it is Shannara. I heard Terry Brooks tell me that himself. I called it Shannara for the longest time. But I read The Sword of Shannara before I read Lord of the Rings. I know. Lord of the Rings was a little intimidating. Lord of the Rings, fantasy for me was kind of like country music. Give me horror and give me science fiction. Fantasy, I read Sword of Shannara, and then I was like, okay, I'd read The Hobbit already, but I hadn't read Lord of the Rings until after I read Sword of Shannara. So, anyway. So growing up, I grew up in a golden age, the post-Star Wars boom. I mean, first of all, you got 70s apocalyptic sci-fi, which is amazing. But then the post-Star Wars boom, which coincided with me becoming an adolescent, going into puberty, being bar mitzvahed at 13 in 1980. And then there was just an explosion of fantasy, science fiction, and horror because it became bankable. It's like Sapido. But it was a big deal. It was a big deal. And so as I moved up, and now I didn't love everything. Slasher movies, some were good, some were bad. My Bloody Valentine, surprisingly good. But there were others that weren't. And so, when you're watching, I would watch every slasher movie. The Burning. Was The Burning better than When a Stranger Calls? Was When a Stranger Calls better than Prom Night? Was Prom Night better than Terror Train? Which Jamie Lee Curtis movie is less than Halloween? Well, all of them, but which one's the closest? I leave that up for you to decide. Why be it for me to tell you what I think? My shifting tastes have changed. But it was great, and at the time, we loved everything. Now, I would go with friends and we'd argue about which was better, but nobody ever said anything sucked. We didn't say things sucked. Reptilicus sucked. But I didn't say that at the time because I knew at one point I liked it. What we all did was we collectively went to this stuff and had a good time. And we'd talk about it incessantly. You'd go to school and talk about it. You'd talk about it all fucking week. And you'd read Stephen King books. Stephen King was a big deal when I discovered horror. It was around the same time. I think Night Shift was the first Stephen King thing I found because I loved short story books. Give me anthologies, and I was a happy man. Harlan Ellison's Dangerous Visions, and again Dangerous Visions. Shit, man, give me sci-fi short stories. I subscribed to Isaac Asimov's science fiction magazine. And look, there was a lot of other science fiction magazines, but I thought Isaac Asimov's was the one because I had been reading. My aunt, who had bought me books, she started to buy me Isaac Asimov's Elijah Bailey robot novels, like was it The Naked Sun, and like By Jupiter. She got me like a box set. Anyway, long time ago. But I was a fanatic, fanatic, but all of it was a continuum of stuff. a continuum of stuff. Now, when I was a young kid, Justice League of America was my favorite comic. It was the only comic I followed, and my mother actually bought him for me. And my mother would go, because you buy them on spindle racks, no direct sale market yet. And my mother would go once a month, and she'd find the latest Justice League comic. Swear to God, my mom bought me Justice League. And I think I started buying Justice League, I want to say in the late 90s. And then what really sent me over the top was Justice League 114, 100-page, giant-size extra. And Justice League 114 had, was it Crisis on Earth 3? It was like a compilation of all the Earth 3 stories with nothing was better. My favorite thing in comics was when the Justice League and Justice Society teamed up every year. That was like the greatest thing ever. The more heroes, the better. Loved it. And that fucking Earth 3 storyline with the evil versions of the Justice League with Power Ring and Ultra, it was Ultraman, right? Ultraman Power Ring. That shit was so dope. I love that so much. And so I love the Justice League. You know, and my friends are Marvel guys like Sean Flaherty, who lived across the street. It was always like, is Silver Surfer better than Superman? I'm like, no. And Marvel was always better. And I'm like, DC is better. I understand demigods. I had the pantheon of gods. We all know. We're fans. We get it. But anyway, long story short, seeing Superman in the movie, seeing Superman the movie at the John Dance, like I was talking about the other night, transcendent experience. And basically from 1975, when I saw Jaws in the theater, to the better part of the 80s, it was 15 years of banger after banger after banger after banger after banger after banger. It didn't fucking matter. It was a golden age of genre cinema that was driven by money. And then when the studios, 1982, if you watch the documentary that I appear in, that MVP put out on Blu-ray, 1982, the greatest geek year ever. If you think about all of those kinds of movies, I mean, it was incredible. It was also, as I talked with my friend Rob G, I have a friend named Rob G who is, he's known in the horror realm, and he's actually a great writer. He did a great write-up of Hills Run Red in Fangoria magazine, which, by the way, one of the highlights of my life, because I wanted to make something that was in Fangoria. We didn't make the cover, but Rob made sure we got like a 5-page article, which was pretty cool. See, you realize your dreams. You don't have to have dreams that are unattainable. I got my name in Fangoria. It was incredible. But it was an amazing time. And, even though certain things might have let you down, like when you went and saw 7 Doors of Death, you understood this was a hugely cut down version of Lucio Fulci's The Beyond, which was impossible to see then. But you go and see 7 Doors of Death because that was the closest you could get. And you were happy. You knew it was cut to shit. You knew all the Italian horror, all the Giallo, all the early Argento was going to be cut. You couldn't get Suspiria on video at the time. And it didn't matter. Whatever you could see, you'd see it. And you'd wonder and lament about one day we're going to get to see this stuff and it's going to be great. But we all loved it. We all just loved it. And we were discerning in our taste, like, yeah, that wasn't very good. But it didn't matter. You would go. I saw Ghoulies in the fucking theater. I went with Adam Carl and saw that at the Admiral Twin in West Seattle. I might have regretted that, but we did go. Same theater I saw Life Force at, which I did not regret because I love boobies. All sizes, shapes, big ones, small ones, athletic ones. We love boobies. And Life Force, I mean, that was a tough one because here you have Mathilda May. Mathilda May has one of the greatest sets of knockers ever put on screen, but she's a space vampire. So to lust after her means you're going to give up your humanity and probably be killed. So I see what Tobe Hooper did. I see what he did. He played upon our puerile adolescent fantasies and turned them against us. And to this day, let's hear it for Arrow putting out the international version of Life Force on 4K. When Scream Factory put out the Blu-ray, which I worked on, I interviewed Tobe Hooper for that, and I was there to produce his audio commentary. They didn't put out the international version in 4K, and that is the superior version of Life Force. Anyway, you know what I'm saying? What I'm saying is, life was great. Being a fan was great. Everything was fun. We loved it all because our identities were not wrapped up in certain versions of things. And there was so much, and you could look at books, you could look at movies, you could become, metal. Heavy metal was tied to horror. And so was punk, Repo Man, Suburbia, The Boys Next Door. That wasn't really punk, but I took a date to that. What a mistake. If you've never seen The Boys Next Door with Maxwell Caulfield and Charlie Sheen, that's rough, dude. Imagine taking a date that you really want to impress to see The Boys Next Door. Not a good time for the Bobster. Although we're still friends, still to this day. She's still one of the most beautiful girls I've ever known in my life. But all of this, is this enough rigmarole? Is somebody going, I can't wait to see somebody say, it's 12:16, you started the show at 11:30, you're now at 46 minutes. Get to the fucking point. All right, here's the point. I thought that James Gunn's Superman teaser was exactly what I thought it was going to be. Remember, on my last stream, I said, what we're looking for here is tone. And I said that the tone was, and a lot of people probably didn't quite understand what I meant. I said the tone was going to take two different disparate fantasy sci-fi films and kind of put them together. One is Back to the Future, and the other is Field of Dreams. Now, don't try and say, well, how does Superman fit into that? I'm talking about tone. The tone of how the fantasy and the reality work together in those movies. And you can go back and watch last observations to hear more about that. And I knew that we were going to see a reality where, because James Gunn has told us, where superheroes exist. Probably for decades, the Justice Society fought in World War II, probably. And we were going to see all that. I knew we were going to see Metamorpho. I knew we were going to see Guy Gardner. I knew we were going to see Hawkgirl, and probably a lot of other things. And I knew Rachel Brosnahan was going to be Lois Lane. I knew a lot of that. We all did. So for me, what I wanted to see was the tone. Show me the tone. What are we going to get? And I thought it was going to be a fantasy. It wasn't going to be New York standing in for Metropolis or Chicago standing in for Gotham City like in the Nolan movies that gives us peak verisimilitude with our world today. I knew that it wasn't going to be our world. I figured, and I was in my own mind, I don't think I said this on the other stream. The way James Gunn handled Xandar in the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, when you have all these people, it's a metropolis. It's like they're walking around in a mall, and there's that great action scene between Star-Lord and Groot and Rocket and Gamora, right? And I figured, and you see all these aliens wandering around. I'm like, that's. If that were on Earth, if Xandar, as depicted in Guardians of the Galaxy, was on Earth, that's what I thought we were going to get with this film. Now, here's the thing. It's a teaser. So I didn't expect we're going to know anything about the plot. We're going to see all this disparate imagery. But what I wanted and what I expected from the teaser, and what I said, and I said this, I said, look, I expect to get that feeling, that Field of Dreams, Back to the Future feeling, which ultimately, at the end of the day, it's the old 3-letter word: fun. Fun, fun, fun. You'll have fun, fun, fun. Here's one thing you don't do as a director, whether you're making an audio drama or you're directing a film or a TV show. Never, ever tell an actor to have fun with it. They don't know what the fuck to do with that. Never say that. But a movie, a Superman movie, should be fucking fun. And I'll tell you something. I loved, as I said, Man of Steel. I thoroughly enjoyed watching Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, even though it was overstuffed and had lots of stupid shit in it. Still loved it. And I think Zack Snyder's Justice League is one of the most fucking metal superhero things we've ever seen on screen. But you know what they're not? They're not fun. They're not joyful. They're apocalyptic. And while for those movies, fine. They're the Wagnerian metal world destroying, all that stuff. Now, some people, it is fun to watch, but there's not joy in it. And people say, well, when Superman flies in Man of Steel, there's joy. It's not joyful. You're dealing with a genocidal maniac in the beginning of the movie, and you're dealing with a genocidal maniac at the end of the movie. And at the end of the movie, Superman is forced, amidst the destruction the Kryptonians are causing, where tens of thousands of people are dying. And that's why people are always like, well, I didn't like Man of Steel because too many civilians died. Yeah, because Superman was busy trying to fight for his life and stop the extinction level event that was happening. He didn't have time to worry about civilians. All he was worried about was surviving and preventing an extinction level event. So I always hate that. People say that, I'm like, yeah, right. He was a little busy, and it was horrible what was happening. But the one thing on the flip side of that was fucking cool to see what would happen if Kryptonians battled in a city. I mean, that was dope as fuck. I loved it. I'm watching this going, my sci-fi 5-year-old brain watching them punch each other. I mean, how many times did I do that with my Mego action figures? I had a girder and panel building set. I don't know if you know what girder and panel building sets were, but a girder and panel building set, just like it sounds, it would come with these plastic girders, and you would build these squares and plastic panels, and you would build skyscrapers. I'd build like the UN, and it was like the most amazing thing, because if you played with stuff, you could build headquarters. You could have Hot Wheels cars, because when I played with things, I would play with things like you make a movie. Like, you have the Starship Enterprise, and it's flying through space, and you can have whatever space anomaly or battles happening, but then you cut to your Mego bridge, and you've got your action figures there, and they have their discussions and whatever's going on the bridge. So that's how I played with my toys. I would go to different scenarios. I didn't realize I was making movies in my head, but I was playing the way I saw things fall out in films. My parents thought I was absolutely out of my mind. I would do soundtrack music, and I would make up the stories and do everybody's dialogue, and I was really loud about it. My dad's den was one of my, actually my closet was next to the den, but he would pound on the wall because I would get really loud, and I'd be in there for hours. Can you imagine a kid for hours just doing music and talking? And my parents must have thought I was a fucking wackadoo, but that's how I played with all my shit. And so, and by the way, other kids didn't play right. You know, kids would pick things up and go, psh! I'm like, you can't just do that. You gotta act like it's real. If you're gonna have Superman and Shazam, aka Captain Thunder, if you're gonna have them interact, this is pre-Kingdom Come, people. Look up Captain Thunder and look up, I don't know the number. It's one of the greatest covers ever. Captain Thunder versus Superman. It's right on the cover of, it's my favorite fucking DC comic when I was a kid. Because the Mego Shazam was a great figure. Loved it. And the Superman was on, those two figures together, they had to fight. And they did fight on that cover of that Superman comic. But so, like, it was I've lost my place. I was making a point. Anyway, the tone. What I wanted was a fantastical tone that harked back. Now, a lot of people say, it looks like the CW. Well, because the CW had the tone of more of that DC comic book, bright, Kurt Swan's drawn Superman kind of thing from the 70s where wacky shit happened, you know, and James Gunn's a big comic book fan. And in the 80s, comics still had that. It still had that. Now, it was totally co-opted by grimdark stuff. And I love that too. Dark Knight Rises, or Dark Knight Returns, and then Batman Year One and Frank Miller's Ronin, you know, talk about it. American Flag was one of my favorite comics. It got dark. It got, along with the rise of punk rock and goth music, you know, you could go home and play In a Flat Field, you know, and read Ronin. I mean, it changed. But I still liked DC's that, whatever that wackiness is. Now, here's the thing. We're talking tone now. If you go back and look at James Gunn's filmography, and I would beg everyone, if you have not seen it, go see his movie Slither. See his movie Slither. And you'll recognize some of his company of players, people that you love. Slither has that kind of, it's that comedic horror, tone. It's not as like hardcore as Reanimator was or From Beyond, but it's got that thing, that James Gunn thing early on. Now, Super, that he made after Slither, is a superhero movie that's pretty dark. But now the movie that I work with James Gunn on, The Specials, was a little bit wackier. I mean, it was a broad comedy, but it was wacky, and that was made in 99, and I think it came out in 2000. But I was expecting that, and in Guardians of the Galaxy, he was able to balance the tone and make it work. I mean, we all love Rocket Raccoon. Nobody looks at Rocket Raccoon and laughs at him. We cry with him. The scene that he had with Thor in Infinity War, or was it Endgame? Endgame. No, maybe I forget. It's all. So what I wanted was a very specific. I wanted to see the super science, bright, fantasy-drenched world of an era of DC Comics that has never been seen. To be fair, the CW shows did in fact touch on went in that same direction. So it's not. I don't think it's I don't think it's wrong to say there's a CW air to what James Gunn is doing, but there's also going to be, James Gunn still has a dark sensibility. So what I saw, I have to say that one of my favorite things I've seen in 2024 is when Superman whistles, you see a rooster tail of snow coming down that tundra, and I knew it. As soon as he whistled, I knew what I was going to see. And I got to say, seeing Crypto show up, I was fucking there, man. I was 5 years old. I was seeing that ape on the top of a horse with his gun, and I was hearing I was hearing electric guitar. I was not hearing. I mean, at that moment, it didn't warrant Goldsmith going. But what I said on the show, what I predicted, I got it. Now I'm not saying, see, I told you so, because I'm gonna say, I loved the Superman trailer. Loved it. Loved what I saw. Loved the tone. Loved the direction. But here's the thing. I have yet to be convinced that we're going to get a great movie. Because that tone and everything we saw from Luthor with a gun, Crypto, Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, saving a kaiju? There's a fucking Godzilla monster in that trailer. Everything in that trailer, I loved it all. Show it to me. Give me more. Let me slow it down. Let me read everybody talking about how many Easter eggs is in that fucking trailer. And there are a lot. I loved it. That 5-year-old kid in me was like, fuck yeah. It's different than any Superman movie we've ever seen. Way different. And I'm like, I'm for that. But I'm only cautiously optimistic about the finished film. Because and I don't think that there's not a problem. Am I excited? Yes. I am hella excited. I really am. But I understand. Jury's out, my friends. Jury is out. And that's okay. It's a teaser trailer. That's all it was. It was a teaser trailer. And what does that trailer tell us? More than anything, it tells us about the tone of the movie. Now, there's going to be a lot of people, a lot of identity politics being played, where people are going to compare and contrast. Natural, that's what human beings do. I don't think that's necessarily... Superman is a character. For me, I started watching Superman, The Adventures of Superman from the 50s, as I talked about, with George Reeves. And Noel Neill was my first Lois Lane. And if you go back and you look at how the two of them looked, they certainly don't look like the Lois Lane. I mean, I saw people tweeting out, they're like, Rachel Brosnahan's not hot enough. She has to have like short skirts. And they're showing pictures of animated, like whether it's from Superman or whether it's from Justice League Unlimited. I'm like, really? You're telling me that Supergirl or Lois Lane should look like an animated character? And I'm just like, what? I mean, it's so bizarre. But I get it. I understand. And I don't begrudge anybody, for what I don't understand. What I don't understand is why everybody, look, I'm taking a wait and see attitude. I don't even think, I thought the Man of Steel trailer, that trailer that everybody loves, fucking great trailer. I don't think that Man of Steel, which I love, lived up to that trailer. That trailer, the feelings and the emotion that you get watching that Man of Steel trailer is not in the finished film. It's not. And because we're all the nostalgia, all the Americana, all the things. See, we're lucky in that since the 1930s, almost every generation has had a different iteration of Superman. Whether it was, Kirk Allen in 1948, on movie screens, whether it was The Adventures of Superman in the 50s, in the 60s there were animation, there was cartoons. Same with the 70s. We got Superman the movie in the 70s that led to Superman 2, which came out in 81 in the States. Superman 3, The Quest for Peace. Superman 4, then Superman sort of laid fallow, but and then we got TV shows, Superboy, 2 different iterations of Superboy, all those things. So there has been a Superman for every generation. And I've been there for it. Did I love the Superboy TV series? Not really. It was a little cheap for me, but I still watched a few. I still enjoyed some of them. And I think that this Superman that we're getting is going to be a new Superman for this new generation. Zack Snyder accomplished, to me, the great thing about the Snyder Cut movement. And there was some good things. The charities, events, they won. They succeeded. And it's interesting. So now you have a great Man of Steel trilogy. If you watch Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, the Ultimate Edition, and you watch Zack Snyder's Justice League, that's a fucking great Superman trilogy. I don't think there's enough Superman in it, but I still think and it was because of the Snyder fandom that we have the Ultimate Edition that we have Zack Snyder's Justice League. So it's a win. So to me, you put that one on the shelf. You put that win on the shelf, okay? Now, you have to you can't not look at what Zack Snyder's output since then has been. You can't tell me that Rebel Moon gives you confidence that he would be able to pull off 2 more Justice League movies, because it would shake my confidence, and I don't want to see any more of those. We got it. All you're going to see is more of the same. You're not going to get The Two Towers and Return of the King. Zack Snyder's Justice League is it, man. It's a 4-hour fucking Justice League movie. I can't imagine more catnip than that. So, and I understand you're not going to give people's identities are wrapped up in the tableaus of Zack Snyder. I get it. I understand. But you know what? I'll tell you something. And I'm never going to take it away. If people feel great emotion watching Zack Snyder's Superman movies, I will never take that away from you. But you know what Zack Snyder's Superman movies didn't have? They didn't have Superman on Lois Lane's roof, sitting down and being interviewed by Lois Lane. And they didn't have that conversation. They didn't have the humanity, the humor, the fucking baller Superman who's like, pink. None of that. There's none of that. That scene of Superman sitting down with Lois Lane is one of the great Superman scenes ever. Because those characters are emotionally resonant and connect. Superman in the Zack Snyder movies is the idea of what Superman is. What we think about, we think about Superman, like, what is he? But for me, Superman was all about, like, George Reeves being a badass, scooping Lois Lane, or being a smartass, or using his powers to get the story. I was a kid that grew up with Superman not as an idea. He was truth, justice, and the American way, but he was also a compelling person. He was a compelling person. Zack Snyder's Superman movies do not have enough of him being a compelling person, either as Clark Kent or as, the scene where Clark Kent's in Richard Lester's Superman 2 when they're at Niagara Falls and he falls into the fire, and the scene where he finally reveals himself and takes off his glasses. It does a great job where he, instead of being the bumbling Lois, he stands up tall, and you're like, oh, that's how come nobody understood that Clark Kent was Superman. Christopher Reeve does it in like one single camera move when he takes the camera's just on him, he takes his glasses off, and I'm like, fuck. That's Superman too. It's not just battles with Kryptonians over cities. It's Superman the man. It's Clark Kent knowing he's Superman. It's the debate that you have at the end of Kill Bill Volume 2, which, by the way, you can now go to Lionsgate Limited and buy limited edition steelbooks of Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill Volume 1, Kill Bill Volume 2, and Jackie Brown. Sorry, shameless plug. But that's what you get. Zack Snyder's Superman movies left me cold from that point of view. But I certainly liked all the cool shit. I liked all the operatic stuff. I felt like I was like at a Rammstein concert. There you go, Dieter Bastian. I've never been to a Rammstein concert, but if I had gone to a Rammstein concert, I believe it would be kind of like what seeing the end of Man of Steel, the very beginning of Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, and most of Zack Snyder's Justice League would be like. And that in itself is awesome. But I think part of the reason that people also love Zack Snyder's Justice League is because they, as human beings, we as human beings, Snyder fans, aren't being judged by their own, Superman is a god. So you don't have to look inward, and you don't have to do any self-examination when you watch those movies, because you're so far apart from where Superman is. It's okay, It's not like when I watched Star Trek as a kid, I'm like, I don't think I'm gonna do as good as Kirk. Like, I had self-doubt because of things I watched. But you watch Zack Snyder's Superman, there's no self-doubt. It makes you feel like you're a fucking god watching it, and I think that's a lot of those movies' appeal. You don't have to look inside, and I think a lot of genre entertainment, indeed, a lot of the storytelling that we are consuming today, and we're getting some great stories. Don't get me wrong, but certainly Star Trek is not a show that makes you look into yourself and make yourself go, I want to do better. It affirms who you are now, and I think that's fucking bullshit. If Star Trek is making you feel good about yourself, it's not good Star Trek. Star Trek should make you feel about being great, being a part of humanity, but Star Trek should make you look inward at yourself and think, I can do better. I want to aspire to be the people on that show. Now Star Trek just says, we're just like you, which is fucking lame. And that's why modern Star Trek sucks. But I'll let other people like it. It's the only fandom where I'm going to be a dick. I'll be a Snyder Bros Star Trek fan. No problem with that. Anyway, I loved James Gunn's trailer for Superman. I love the tone. I love seeing Mr. Terrific. I love seeing Hawkgirl. I love seeing Metamorpho. I love seeing Rachel Brosnahan as Lois. I love seeing Jimmy. I love seeing him saving a kid. I love seeing the Daily Planet. All that shit. I loved all of it. It made me cautiously optimistic. I was surprised, however, and, I'm deliriously excited for the movie. But I'm not convinced it's going to be the end-all, be-all Superman movie. I'm very optimistic. Can't wait to see it. Hope it's great. I can't wait to see another trailer, and I'm eagerly awaiting the film's release in July of 2025. I think James Gunn's going to knock it out of the park, but I'm not as excited as, say, I was to see Endgame, or, to be honest, Infinity War. So, just being honest, take that with a grain of salt, as you will, and let's see, what do you have to say about all of this? I don't know. We're going to look. We're going to find out. Let's delve into what you guys are saying. I don't know how many people are watching this right now. But there's a 1,175 people watching this show. Well, here's to you all. Here's a mason jar. This is not the mason jar that was left on Holly Hunter's hearing desk in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Man, that grosses me out every time I watch the movie. Let's see what Scott Bartholomew says. This trailer embodied all I'd hoped for. Total badass in tone and theme. Yeah, there you go. Cyan, I think I know I'm mispronouncing your name. Cyan Aguirre has been a member for 26 months. S. Beam has been a member for 47 months. Scott Bartholomew has been a member for 19 months and says that Gen X does not have the appreciation of IPs like us boomers. Gunn's Superman trailer reaction proves that. wait a second, I'm Gen X. I am not a boomer. And I think we appreciate it. I think it's the younger audience. I think it's millennials. Millennials, it's not so much Gen Z because they don't have, Gen Z is not, they're not big movie fans. Some are, but I think it's millennials. But yeah, I mean, it's all over the place. And look, there's a lot of people, I understand. Henry Cavill in his Superman costume, that outfit's badass. It doesn't get much better. I think I have 3 different Hot Toys figures of him. I admit, like, he's the perfect guy. But the thing is, he's the perfect embodiment of a man, of a Superman, but that's not why I watch Superman movies. Henry Cavill was never given material to make me love him as a man. He did all this cool shit, but I didn't love his character the way I loved Christopher Reeve when he was on the rooftop with Lois. Because he just didn't have that material. They were not interested in making that. Nathan Trujillo says, I think the opening of the trailer was symbolic of how Superman has been treated by the fandom over the years. Battered and beaten, but the promise of going home was given. That put tears in my eyes. Well said, Nathan. Well said. I think I agree with you. Kenneth Colton. And look, who took him home? You know, Crypto. And Crypto's from Krypton. You need friends. You need people that know you, even if they're canines. I guess, though, Crypto wouldn't technically be a canine because they're not, it just looks like one. Kenneth Colton, who's been a member for 24 months, says, James Gunn is cooking up something damn special come summer of 2025. I totally agree. I think we're going to get, as I said, a combination of Field of Dreams and Back to the Future. Not that any of the subject matter of those 2 movies are going to have anything to do with Superman, but the feeling of those films. As I said before, when Kevin Costner's dad comes, Dad, you know, Dwyer Brown is playing Kevin Costner's dad, and you know the James Earl Jones when he turns back and looks before he disappears into the cornfield. Come on, we're gonna get moments like that in this Superman, and we're gonna get perilous moments like Marty McFly, but it's gonna be fun peril. You know, who hasn't wanted to see Superman fight a giant monster? I mean, come on, in a movie. Pod Racing Palpatine says, happy birthday, Rob, and a Merry Christmas to one and all. Live long and unlimited power to all. That's very nice of you to say. Thank you. Thank you, Pod Racing Palpatine. I kind of want to see, you know, every time I see your name show up, I want to see that deleted scene, you know, at the Boonta Eve race. You think Palpatine ever, put on a helmet and raced? If they ever re-release Racer, they should have Palpatine. Palpatine should be a pod racer if they ever do that. Because I want to see, look, Justice for Ben Quadinaros, man. I'm on the Justice for Ben. I'm on that tip. Whenever somebody, you know, if there's a change.org or a Patreon or something to raise money for Justice for Ben Quadinaros, I'm on it. I want to see Ben Quadinaros take on Palpatine. That's my fantasy pod racing league wish. Can somebody make that happen? Thomas Logan said, the trailer looks awful. I expected you to say this. Horrid cinematography, color grading, goofy tone, generic set pieces, soulless, brutal downgrade from Mokri and Fong's gorgeous visuals. Hey, man, you know what? You might be right. I don't know. I haven't seen the movie. Can't tell you. But I think that the visuals were right for what we saw. And but that's the thing. You're now making a judgment aesthetically about a movie. And Zack Snyder's, the visuals are no doubt great. But for a Superman movie, they don't work for everybody. And that's the thing. Everybody likes different things. I think, as I said, I like Zack Snyder's 3 Superman films. But I recognize that a lot of that stuff wasn't for everyone. I would say the daylight scenes in those movies are not the best either, for different reasons. The color palette, Superman being grimdark doesn't work. It just doesn't work. You know, even the costume, they had to lighten it up for Justice League. Lee Cameron says, Rob, the original Spider-Man movie is my Star Trek. I've watched it over 30 times. The movie's commitment to sincerity, even when ridiculous, had me charmed. I agree. The first half of that movie especially, before Peter Parker really delves into his powers, I love it. Love it. Shonen Kaiju says, chiming in from Kansas, the home of Clark Kent. That was a good trailer. Gunn gets what so many want from Superman. My mom called me after watching it to tell me how excited she is for the film. Wow, man, if your mom's calling you, first of all, kudos to having your mom, for having a mom that watches the trailer, and double kudos for having a mom that watches the trailer and calls you to discuss it with you. That's amazing. Scott Bartholomew says, Superman trailer riff reminded me of Top Gun. Yeah, it kind of did too. Yeah, I think so too. The Jughead 77 says, good morning, Robert. The new Superman trailer was just okay to me. I hope James Gunn gets it right with his reboot, in my opinion. Gets it right with his reboot. There was no need. Well, I would say that there is, because every generation since the 30s has got a new iteration of Superman. And I think this one, you know, that will probably, look, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We'll know in July. But I choose the danger. I choose to be excited. I want to be excited. Pod Racing Palpatine says, in trailers, why do they use established musical themes and slow them down and add drums in the hope it makes them sound epic? I hate it. Data Generations. Yeah, you know, trailers, it's all stylistic. They used to use, I mean, remember when they used the slowed down version of, Darren Aronofsky's Requiem for a Dream in Lord of the Rings? I mean, that was a great idea. It worked really well. Dun-dun, dun-dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun-dun. I mean, but I think slowed down versions make things sound more epic or whatever. You know, it's different. Like there's so many different examples of that. But you're right. I mean, I can understand that. The Jughead says 2 for a reboot, a sequel to Man of Steel with Henry Cavill and solo Batman, directed and starring Ben Affleck, would have got the DCEU back on track. Look, I think it is one of the great tragedies of Warner Brothers' recent history that we did not get the Ben Affleck movie where reportedly Deathstroke, the Terminator, was the villain. I fucking love Deathstroke going up against Affleck's Batman. Why did somebody not let that happen? I don't know. I love Ben Affleck's Batman. I think Bruce Wayne running into the destruction of Metropolis at the beginning of Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice is one of my favorite things in any superhero movie ever. Is it dark and apocalyptic? Yes. But watching Ben Affleck, buff Ben Affleck in that beautifully tailored three-piece suit, Sans jacket, going into the destruction, that was the most Batman thing ever. Kind of like Luke Skywalker standing on the planet at the end of The Last Jedi. He wasn't even there. That was the most Jedi thing ever, too. But anyway, don't want to get into that battle. B Things says, for the first time in a long time, I saw a trailer that made me actively want to see a movie. Well, there you go. I would see this Superman even if it wasn't Superman. Well, see, here's the thing. And as I tried to make my long-winded point about being a fan, I did not go into watching this Superman trailer comparing or contrasting it with anything else. I never do. Because I grew up reading Superman comics. And how many Superman comics have I read? I mean, a lot. And a lot of them are all very different, you know, depending on which. I had a hard time coming to grips with John Byrne's Superman reboot after Crisis. You know, that was. So to me, when I'm watching, this is James Gunn's Superman. I'm like, this is really interesting. I never once, when I was watching the trailer, or most of the day, think about Zack Snyder's Superman watching that trailer. I was thinking about James Gunn's previous movies, Slither, Super, the 3 Guardians of the Galaxy movies, The Suicide Squad. I thought about his book, The Toy Collector. I thought about The Specials, the movie that I worked on that he wrote and starred in. Well, one of the co-stars. I thought about Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead. I did not think about comparing and contrasting this movie to Donner's Superman films, of which there are 2 good ones and 2 questionable ones, or anything else. I was looking at and judging it, as I do with all movies, judging it on its own merits. And as a teaser trailer, I'm teased. And in that sense, it worked. Let me see. Neural Ilyana? Is it Neural Ilyana? I hope I didn't get that wrong. It's a cool name, Neural Ilyana. Like Ilyana Rasputin of the New Mutants. Hi, Rob. What if the movie doesn't make what Warner Brothers expects? What if it bombs? Is Warner Brothers going to reboot all over again? Thanks, Rob. big fan from Australia. Oh, I love Australia. You know what I would really love right now? I would love a pint of Cooper's on tap. Boy, I do miss Cooper's. I do. That's a very good question. Here's what I think. If Superman fails and it doesn't catch fire and it doesn't make a lot of money, and let's just call it $1 billion. Let's say if it's not a $1 billion movie, if it does Man of Steel numbers and it's a $600 million movie, I think that's it for the DCEU. Because if it doesn't, then all their other movies are like, well, do you think this one's going to be good? You're going to be in the same lame duck situation. It doesn't matter. This movie has to be good. It has to be good. Otherwise, superheroes. I mean, if you can't make if you can't make Superman the king of all superheroes with this movie, and again, you bring that tone, you bring that 4-quadrant families. Kids of all ages. If you make a 65-year-old grandfather who's taking his 50-year-old son, who's bringing their, 25-year-old grandson and 10-year-old great-grandson or granddaughter or, non-binary, whomever, if they're bringing their family and they can watch it all together and love it and go out for pizza afterwards and talk about how much they loved it, then James Gunn has succeeded. And he knows this. And so does Peter Safran, and so does everyone at Warner Brothers. The Brujo. A Brujo sounds pretty good. You're drinking beer. Oh, well, never mind. By having Krypto rescue Superman in the trailer, is it a reverse save the cat moment? Well, a save the cat moment comes from screenwriter Blake Snyder's book, Save the Cat, which is a great book about screenwriting. Yes, it's formulaic, and is it as good as story? What's this? Robert? Why do I always blank on his name? Who teaches the greatest screenwriting course ever? I'll figure it. I'll think about it. Is it a reverse? I don't know. I mean, it might be. I mean, to me, that is more of a establishing the kind of tone of the movie overall that it is. James Gunn was telling us something with that moment. Not just that Krypto's in the movie, but that Krypto's in the movie and plays a part, that they have this relationship. We've never seen a Superman. By telling us up front that Superman has Krypto, who is a superpowered dog, that he can whistle and Krypto will hear him apparently anywhere in the world and come take him home and rescue him. That is very different from Richard Donner's Superman and certainly very different from Zack Snyder's Superman. And I think that moment alone was James Gunn establishing, oh, no. This is not like any other Superman movie you've seen. But you know what it reminded me of? Not exactly, but it reminded me of him going for a Superman for All Seasons, which is a wonderful, if you haven't read a Superman for All Seasons, it is a wonderful Superman. It's basically 4 Superman stories, but the tone of it, if he can hit that, and it's full of super science and crazy sci-fi concepts, but if he hits that tone, it's going to work. It's going to work. Richard K says, we know Doomsday or Darkseid are not in this movie, so there are only 2 who can beat down Superman. So for the villain in this movie to beat down Superman like that, doesn't this make Superman weak? Well, it depends. Remember when Superman was first created, he couldn't fly. He wasn't invincible. He was more like a wrestler, a super wrestler. He could leap tall buildings in a single bound, and he could stop a locomotive. Pretty good. But he wasn't invincible. And I guess he was pretty invincible. But I think that you've got to... Look, if Superman was limitlessly powerful and he had no limitations, well, then he becomes a boring character. And certainly we saw when John Byrne rebooted the character in 86, after Crisis was over, he put limitations on Superman, which I think is good. And, if Superman is fighting a giant kaiju in the city, some Godzilla-esque monster, he should get the stuffing kicked out of him. Because otherwise, there's nothing on Earth that can hurt him. And that's no fun. So, we have to go back and think, well, how powerful is he? And then maybe He doesn't know how powerful he is, and he has to push himself even further. That maybe that levels him up, glows him up. Who knows? I don't know. So yeah, and I think, you know, Doomsday. The problem is Doomsday and Darkseid. Darkseid is way more interesting as a scheming character, as a character that, you know, has his whole pantheon of underlings, and he has Apocalypse, and he's looking for the anti-life equation. Like, he's doing something. Superman's a nuisance for him, but he's got his own. He's on his own trip, and Darkseid, Doomsday. Look, let's face it. Doomsday's kind of dumb. I read The Death of Superman. I mean, I know Kryptonian science. It's a hulking monster with bones protruding out of his body, and he's really strong and can beat Superman up and kill him. What a boring villain. I mean, give me Mongol. Give me Warworld. Give me something. But Doomsday, no. See, the thing is, I want characters that can go toe-to-toe with Superman, that also have, they're not just like, Doomsday only exists to kill Superman, to fight, that's it. There's no, it's not like he wants anything. Doomsday doesn't have much of a philosophy, at least not when he was first introduced. Who cares? I don't care. I just, it was not great. that whole thing, you know, it was kind of like the first, when Todd McFarlane took over Spider-Man and did the six episodes, the art was great, but the story, Scott Bartholomew says the DCEU is greater than the MCU. I don't know about that. Are you talking about movies or comics? Because I think the 23 movies of the Infinity Saga are an epic win in terms of fantasy filmmaking. In the history of fantasy filmmaking, people will be looking back for years at the MCU. And I mean, it's some good stuff. Cupcake Bliss for 27 Canadian. Wow, thanks, man. That's very nice of you. I'm happy to see that people are excited for the new Superman trailer. After seeing the trailer, I'm going to pass on this movie. It reminds me too much of the Chris Reeve style, and I never liked those films. Too cheesy for me. But okay, I can understand that. Knowing what you like and what you don't like, why not give them a chance? Check them out. Maybe they'll change your mind. But you know, you'll hear that. You're going to hear people. They might like it. They might not like it. But why not give it a chance? You know, I mean, it might surprise you. Like I think that if you're given an opportunity to see a movie like Superman, and you're at all interested. There's a lot of thought and money put behind this. As an entertainment, it's 2 hours of your time. Wouldn't you be curious just to check it out? But then again, if you already, I can't fault you in your reasoning. If you already think that the Christopher Reeve films and style, you never like those films because they're too cheesy, they are from the 70s. I mean, at least the first one. I can understand that. And the thing about Donner's Superman is the first half of it, or the first 40 minutes, are very serious. And then the movie totally changes tone. And it's kind of all over the place. So I can understand that. I get that. And fair enough. By you saying that, I would imagine that you might be, let's call it, younger than me. I would imagine you probably weren't born, and this is not a criticism, but I would imagine you probably weren't born at the time those movies came out. Because styles change. I totally agree. There's a lot of movies you go back and it's really hard because our idea of what comedy is, or our idea of it's different. So things change. So you're totally welcome to that. However, keep an open mind. Maybe the movie will surprise you. RRTNZ says, "Hail, Bob. I agree about the Man of Steel trailer. Better than the film. I agree. Just like some of the trailers for Superman Returns, I'll grant you, even though I worked on it, they sold a movie that the movie didn't quite deliver. And trailers have done that a lot throughout history. I'm cautiously optimistic about Gunn's film, but we'll wait and see. Kids wear Superman pajamas. Superman wears Chuck Norris pajamas." When that little kid puts up the flag with Superman's, come on, that was pretty. I love that. That was awesome. Derek Anderson, how are you, sir? Ultraman, Guy Gardner, Mr. Terrific, Metamorpho, and Crypto, the frickin' Super Dog, all in a Superman trailer. How can any DC fan not be excited? And we still haven't seen The Authority. By the way, I think that's who beat up Superman. It was The Authority who did it. I think that The Authority, in my mind, if I was making this movie, if I was a betting man, I would say that The Authority they're the superheroes that lord over, and the Bleed and all that, lord over the earth. And they're amoral, not nice people. And I think that Superman, that's who he comes into conflict with. It's the reverse. People have talked about it's the reverse Kingdom Come. So, yeah. RRTNZ says, calling it now, the main physical threat is Bizarro. I don't know about that. I don't know if they're going to go with Bizarro, because Bizarro might be too much. I think Bizarro, they need more of a threat, but it could be. Hayden says, Rob, I will crack a Cooper's Pale Ale down here in Adelaide for you, bro. Well, if you're in Adelaide, should you be drinking wine? Because Adelaide's got some good wine. But drink that, Cooper, son. But get it on tap. Not Fake in Maine says, I love it, but I'm just 30 minutes away from Cleveland. It's kind of a birthright. I've been to the Superman house several times. Cleveland, Ohio, the real birthplace of Superman. Well, that's good. That's your 5th super chat, according to this. I can see that. But thank you for that. I haven't been there. I want to go there. The real birthplace. Blue Sunrise says, I agree, Rob. They need to use their alter egos more in all Superman movies. There's so much material to work with there. I totally agree. Totally agree. Mario Lopez coming in from Portugal, coming in hot from Portugal, says, I did not like the teaser. A dog with a cape. Really? No verisimilitude. Come on, man. Crypto has to have a cape. And we don't know why. But that's the thing. Here's the thing. Let me explain. A lot of people have been talking to me about this. Verisimilitude, the quality of being real. Verisimilitude makes you try and make something appear real. Verisimilitude also has to be verisimilitude within the universe. Like a fantasy movie can have verisimilitude too. Like if you're making a movie about Middle Earth, physics should still work when you go to Middle Earth. I mean, you can have Oliphants, and would the physics really work? I don't know. There's one thing in the extended version of Lord of the Rings that I think is missing verisimilitude, and one things that's bothered me in Lord of the Rings is when the army of the dead shows up and the way they move. And it's silly to say, I know, but to me that's where Lord of the Rings, of all the things in Lord of the Rings, I'm going to complain about the army of the dead, but they just move too fast. They move too fast. I'm like, I mean, who cares at that point? You're totally bought into it. It's awesome. But fantasy worlds need verisimilitude too. So James Gunn has to provide his fantasy world, and there must be verisimilitude within the universe of that movie. So Mario, by the way, say hi to your mom for me. That crypto, the reason crypto can be there, they got to explain it, and we have to believe it. But that's the thing. James Gunn is going to make us, he made us believe in the Guardians of the Galaxy and all that craziness. He made us believe. So I think he's going to make us believe in this. Kelvin Wellborn, man, there's a lot of Aussies in this chat. I know, because it's your time zone, right? I'm listening to True Noir. It is great. Kelvin, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. So my God Ruler says, remember me, Rob, this soups is a perfect fusion. I think so too. I think that we're going to be getting that perfect fusion. Hayden says, you know how you get the mainstream audience into Superman? Throw in a dog. I'm loving this. I know, right? Who doesn't love a dog? Who doesn't love a dog in a Superman movie? RRTNZ says Chris Reeve was Superman. Everyone else is acting. It's true. But you know what? Come on. Superman 3, although Superman 3's got great stuff. Superman 4, they didn't have the money. They didn't have the screenwriters. It's kind of a bummer. So let's say I just want to make sure I've caught up with everybody. Let me go back down to the bottom. Is that J-Mobile? J-Mobile says, I hope Soups is great. And I'm someone who isn't a big Soups fan, but I love Man of Steel. I just fear that the 80s, I'm 86, 80s babies and after don't have a huge connection or fondness to the Donner and Reeves style. Oh, I agree. Listen, you know, J-Mobile, or is it J-Mobile? You make a really good point. And obviously, the times change, styles change. And I've often said, like I use Star Trek as an example, when you expect modern writers who, let's say they're in their 30s, okay, or even a writer who's, say, 40 years old. You go back 40 years and somebody was born in 1984, they probably were, it was the 90s before they started watching movies or TV shows religiously that weren't just animation or stuff on Nickelodeon or Disney Channel or whatever they were watching. And so their primary, what they're consuming primarily was modern 90s programming. It's just a reality of life. It's very difficult to go back before you were born. Especially, remember, let's give it 10 years. So it's I think of it as 10 years after you're born. It's very hard to go back and look at things before you're born because the style has already changed, and it's really difficult to go back and put yourself into the mindset of what they were doing back then. So I totally agree with you. It's a really good point. Now, I think James Gunn will be giving you a movie for your sensibilities. He's making a movie for today. And I don't think you need to have a special reverence for Donner's Superman to love this movie. If it's great. As I said, I'm cautiously optimistic, but I have yet to be totally convinced that we're going to get the greatest movie of all time. Even though I don't think it has to be the greatest movie of all time. B Things says, I love a lot of VFX styles, even crappy ones, but I'm hopeful that this movie will manage to look as though the VFX shots just happened to be captured by a camera rather than looking like VFX. B Things, couldn't agree with you more. That, to me, is peak verisimilitude. If you're watching, and I'll tell you something, I really thought, I haven't looked at all the frame grabs. I know people have analyzed this to death already. I haven't really delved into that because I was working today. I did like that shot of Mr. Terrific. That looked really cool, but I agree, the special effects have to fit the world. You know, you have to believe that they exist in that world, and they shouldn't appear like special effects. Effect shots have to have verisimilitude within the world that you're in. I think that is I think that's very important. Bert says, how about that fro on a spectacled Clark Kent? I love that. I thought that was hilarious. You know, I thought Guy Gardner's hair was great because his hair is supposed to be stupid. And I love the fact that all those uniforms that we saw in Hawkgirl and Lord and I think Mr. Terrific aren't those all from, they're like Maxwell Lord's. They're all like, they're the corporate Justice League. Like they're paid to do those jobs, which I think is really part of what we're going to see. If you've got the Authority and then you've got a pay-to-play Justice League, there's a lot of stuff that's going on in here that I think is really fascinating. And again, it's world building that I am so there for. Andy Haynes has been a member of the channel for 15 months. Roger Paulson, his name is Roger Paulson, gifted 5 Burnettwork memberships. Well, thank you. And I think I am caught up over there. Let's see. And by the way, Roger Paulson's recipients are Walter Whitewalker, Derek Anderson, the DA, Fireside, Marco, and Georgie Girl. That's awesome. And I agree. I agree with what the DA said. The DA is a wise man. And when he talks about what we're getting in a Superman trailer, what we're getting is the DC universe. We literally are getting the DC universe. And we've never seen the DC universe before. We're not getting the DC EU. We're getting the DC universe. And that has a certain fealty to the comics. And I think that's amazing. I think. And I can't believe that we're getting that. I didn't expect to lean that heavily into it all. So, I mean, that's really great stuff. I think, yeah, I'm caught up. We're all caught up. So hang on, let me just see what this is. No, we're all caught up. Well, listen, everybody, I got to get True Noir launched. It will be available today. If you want to get True Noir, you can get it. The best place to get it is our website, truenoir.co, not com, but truenoir, TRUENOIR.co. You can get all 3 episodes. It is out today. And hey, if you want to do YouTube reviews, True Noir is a totally independently produced production by me and my production partners. We're way out on a limb on this. Any support we can get. Look, even if you don't like it, hey, that's helpful too. Tell us what you think. I would really appreciate it if you like noir, if you like movies like Chinatown or LA Confidential. That's the genre that we're going for True Noir. And for me, I talk mad shit on the internet about what I think is good storytelling. I've put everything that I know, or I think I know, into True Noir. I know it's only an audio drama, but in terms of production and directing actors and creating something out of nothing, literally, we started with nothing. There was no cameras to shoot locations. We had to create everything from scratch and get the actors to help us. At the top of the show, I played you Katie Sackhoff and Michael Rosenbaum. Any help would be greatly appreciated. You know, I'll tell you something. When John Schnepp made The Death of Superman Lives, what happened? He was very upset because so much of it was illegally, there was millions of illegal downloads of his film. And he spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on that movie, and he had to pay his investors back. I'm kind of in the same situation. And it crushed him to see how many people didn't support his effort. And I'm not of the opinion you don't have to support everybody's effort. But I do think that the future, if you want to be a creator or anybody wants to be a creator, like I have mad respect for the Rippaverse. You know, I really think that if you have a creator, you know, in Eric, and he puts his own money down and creates a comic book, and he did a great thing. He created a 96-page graphic novel, and then he sold it direct to the consumer through his own work. I really respect that. I think anybody that wants to be a creator, and we live in times where all us fans that are going to also try and create should help each other out, you know? And anybody who wants to help us out with True Noir or purchase a subscription to it or watch it or help us in any way, I will remember that. And if you have anything to promote, any artwork or anything, a movie that you're making, a fan film that you're making, come to me, come to this channel. And, you know, moving forward as fans, we should help each other out. And one of the things that I've always believed in is that if you are a fan and you've been a fan your whole life, take a shot at creating something. Even if you're just going to write a short story or whatever that thing is, take that shot. And if you have something you want to promote, I'm happy to help you do it. Come to this channel, I'll interview you and bring whatever it is you're making. And I would hope, you know, with True Noir coming out, you do the same for me, because by God, we need your help. And I know it's not for everybody. It's not science fiction. It's not fantasy. I love hard-boiled crime thrillers. It's set in the 1930s. But take a gander, and I'd love to hear what you think. So it'll be available today, truenoir.co, and then we're trying to figure out how to make it available on all these other different podcast platforms. But like Apple uses AI to optimize your podcast, and I'm like, we spent 1 million years mixing the thing. I don't want AI to optimize it. And also, if you have a home theater system, there is a 5.1 mix that we can't put on a podcasting platform. We have to have the whole thing finished to put it up on Audible, which it's not. It's going to start coming out. The first 3 episodes are tomorrow. Then we have a few video pieces with Max Allan Collins, the writer, and then the rest of the show drops every consecutive Friday beginning January 10th. So tomorrow, the first 3 episodes, The Nitty Raid, Visiting Hours, and Merry Christmas, Mr. Heller. So listen to those, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. And on that note, I'm going to think about the bespectacled fro on the bespectacled Clark Kent with the fro. I love that. It really tickled me. Kung Fu Hot Dog has been a member for 28 months. Well, thank you, Kung Fu Hot Dog. And RRTNZ, all the way from NZ means New Zealand. Kia ora, mate. Never change, Rob. You're Prince. No, Prince is right. Prince is right there. Shredding eternally, forever. He never meant to cause you any sorrow until he died and passed away too young. He never. You know what? Every Friday night I call not your butt up on the phone, but a butt up on the phone, a deeper voice answers and says, you're not at home. I'm telling you, Irresistible Bitch, that's a Prince song you should listen to. It was a B-side. As a matter of fact, you should listen to all Prince, but you know what you should really listen to if you've not heard, read, or listen to the set, if you got the vinyl, listen to side 2 of 1999. It's only got 2 songs on it. Let's Pretend We're Married and DMSR. Listen to those and tell me that those songs will not put a little dance in your walk. I'm telling you, check them out. So good. So good. Anyway, I don't know. Drink to Prince. Here's to him. As a matter of fact, well, no, I'll get that later. I'm going to end this show. I want to thank everybody for generously supporting the channel via super chats and tips. I want to thank everybody for being great fans. I want to thank everybody for, you know what, even if you have a different point of view than me, or I like that you're here, I like that you listen, I like that you all interact. It means a lot, and let's keep doing that. Let's move forward and let's have some fun. Remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And you know what? Don't forget to look up.